Nice pool.
Good evening and welcome to the Monday, December 11, Muscatine School District Board of Education meeting. Madam Secretary, can you please take roll and help us determine the quorum, please?
Sure. Directors Connard.
Here.
Cooney.
Here.
DeBeat.
Here.
LaRue.
Here.
Phillips. Here. Schneider.
Here.
Shore.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you. Muscatine High School bowling team will lead us into the pledge tonight. Please stand.
How many takes that take?
Good strike, right? Thank you, Muscatine High School bowling team. On behalf of the board, we would like to welcome all of you, visitors and media representatives tonight. And moving forward with our agenda, we move to the student school board representative updates. Kira or Trey would like to start first? Please.
Not on.
Last week was Happiness Week for MHS students. The student council members greeted people at the doors with candy canes and handed those out. And they also handed out hot chocolate on Friday and cookies on Monday. And then Wednesday, they had dog day where teachers bring their dogs into school. And then
Try it now.
is it working? Oh, okay. Secondly, the student council hosted Mr. Muscatine, which is a comedic event where 5 boys compete in different categories. The 5 categories this year were group dance, karaoke, speed date, with the homecoming queen, and silly swimwear, and then talent. All the profit made for that was given to MCSD or the Cayenne Food Drive. Key Club is now selling Santagrams, which are a candy cane and then a little note to attach to it, and you can buy one and send it to your friend. And all those are being sold at lunch for $1. And then on December 15th, the students will receive them in class. Lastly, final week is coming up for MHS students. They will begin Monday the 18th and conclude on Wednesday the 20th. Students will come to class. All finals will be held from 8:20 to 12:28. After students eat lunch, they can either go home or they can stay for remix in their classes. And then all students will go to Christmas break until January 4th.
All right. And with that Mr. Muscatine competition, there was also a can drive that lasted through the month of November. The total raised for that can drive and Mr. Muscatine, that was around $1,200, I believe, which is good. And so that's about what's going on inside the school. And then as far as athletics go, most of the sports are doing great right now. Bowling, we've only had 1 loss. I'm guessing that they'll probably make another run at state as they did last year, placing 5th last year, I believe. Girls basketball, they're ranked 15th right now in the state, which is good. They only have 1 loss, and that's to Pleasant Valley, which is one of the best teams in the state, so that's kind of a given. Boys basketball team is a relatively young basketball team, but they're 1-2 right now. They're most likely going to be a lot better next year in the upcoming years. Boys swim, we're doing all right. Got a couple losses, but we got senior night coming up this Thursday. Boys wrestling, they had their first home meet last week, and then they're going to have their final home meet this week. They have 1 ranked wrestler. He's top 5 in his weight class. It's Evan Frankie. And then what sports am I missing? The girls wrestling, they have about 15 wrestlers out, which is good numbers for being one of the first years. And recently they wrestled against the Davenport schools, and that is just all of Davenport is only on one wrestling team, which is really good for that Muscatine has that many compared to their amount, since Muscatine is relatively smaller than Davenport. That's about it that I have today.
I have a question. Well, it's just information. I have a relative that has a daughter that's in the wrestling in West Marshall, and was told that technically the girls wrestle everybody within the state. They are not actually like how the boys are now by your district or whatever with it, that anybody can come from all over the state to be able to do their wrestling. And I think it's just shows that there's that many girls that want to be able to start this going really well. And so by in the next few years, they'll start to be able to do similar to the boys. So I like that. Thank you.
I have a question about your schedules and finals. So this is the first year in I don't know how long that finals have occurred before break or that the semester ends. So have you noticed any difference in like how you're feeling as that comes up? Do you feel like you've crammed a lot, or just what do you think of it overall?
The only notice I only don't have very many classes, so I can't really speak to this matter, but my math class, it's been relatively goodly paced, so we'll have enough time to study for our final. But Spanish is going real hard at the end here, but that's just how it goes every year, so.
I don't know. I guess I like when it isn't that break, because that means that I get my full break, because when it is at the end of the break, I usually spend the last week of breaks studying, or the last few days studying for my classes. So in that way, that is nice. And this week has really been dedicated across the board from most of my teachers to studying for the final. So
Any more questions? Yeah, thank you, Kara and Trey. Thank you. Good report. Okay, our next item on our agenda is Citizen Speaks. If anyone in the audience wants to address the board, please step to the podium, state your name and address. You will have 3 minutes. Per Iowa code, we cannot respond or engage in any discussion during the board meeting.
Hello, my name is Lori Luzinski, and I live at 1993 Sweetland Road in Muscatine County. It's the end of the year here, the calendar year, and it's time to thank every one of our school board members, and please pass this to Mike too, for everything you do. Daphne for making heads and tails out of this, and all of the members, and Clint, the superintendent. You have a rocking finance guy. We're lucky to have Mr. Williams. We're lucky to have Ms. Hoffman and all your HR people. It amazes at how good they are at what they do, and they're not getting rich, let's face this. And none of you are getting paid. And I don't think a lot of people know that. There's a lot of whining, and you always come out of it with grace, and you do it with fiscal responsibility. You make our tax dollars scream. You stretch them so far. I'm in awe. I just want to make sure you knew how thankful I was, because I'm such a fan of public education, and especially the Muscatine schools. And I think I speak for a lot of people. So be sure to know that we all appreciate everything you do and all the sacrifices that you make. And be proud of this incredible, especially Tony. He knows my proclivity for country western music, right? He knows not to do that. But yeah, this is great. Be proud of yourself, and have a wonderful holiday season.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's so nice of you, Lori, to really celebrate all the successes that we all celebrate here in Muscatine, and especially in our school district. Thank you. We do appreciate that. Anyone would like to say anything? Okay, with that, we move into next item, the AEA Program Review Report with Becky.
Yes, thank you. All right, well, this evening there are going to be several of us that are going to be sharing some information with you all around special education programming. So, our current state, so ESSA designation. So ESSA stands for Every Student Succeeds Act. So last year we had 5 buildings were designated last year as targeted. We had subgroups that were identified with students of disabilities not making adequate growth and achievement. We were also identified as a district under the IDEA differentiated accountability as needing Tier 3 supports in the area of K-6 literacy. So both our ESSA and our IDEA DA designations illuminated the need for our district to determine how to improve supports, services, and instruction for students with disabilities. We've also seen an increase in behavior needs, both social and emotional supports. So this spring, our MCSD service delivery plan, which is a plan that is created by the district, the plan does not get turned into the state, but it must be on file and be able to be readily available if someone from the state would ask. And this is a 5-year plan that details your service delivery plan and your options in your district. So that is something that is done every 5 years. And in this spring of 2024, our 5-year is up. So we will be looking at this plan and renewing it. So in looking to our AEA 9 to provide some guidance and help with future planning, that's when you're going to meet tonight, possibly for the first time or not. Thank you for being here this evening. But we look to our AEA to provide us some guidance, to gather some information, some data, to tell us a little bit of how we are doing with special education services and programs in all of our schools for our district. So tonight we have Kim Hoffman, Director of Special Ed for AEA 9. We have Shane Williams, Director of Educational Services, AEA 9, and Susan Downs, District Support Administrator from AEA 9. So the 3 of them and myself are going to be sharing some information with you, and at the end we will have time for questions.
Hello, I'm Susan Downs, the District Support Administrator. I'm going to just briefly talk a little bit about the ESSA designations that Becky referred to. We did have 5 buildings last year that were designated as targeted, which means that they had 1 or more subgroups that on the Iowa Performance Profile scored in the bottom 5% of the state. And those were Muscatine High School, Susan Clark. You can see the areas that they were designated in. And then Franklin, Jefferson, and McKinley Elementaries. All of them were designated for students with disabilities, and then McKinley and Muscatine High School were designated in some other subgroup areas. Once designated as targeted, they remain that way for 3 years. So last year would have been the first year. During the first year, then we have the buildings go through a data analysis, which we did with them in the spring. The district decided to have all buildings then do a data analysis, and then from there they wrote action plans for improvement, and then they review those plans each year and continue to look at their data to see if they're on track. And we will say that when we looked at the data this fall, all of them have made improvement in all of those areas, so they're moving in the right direction. Then this fall, an additional building, Madison Elementary, has also been designated as targeted for students with disabilities, just showing the continued need for us to focus in that area in terms of how we can improve the supports for our students with disabilities.
Good evening. Shane Williams, Director of Ed Services. I'm just going to foreshadow a little bit about some of the specificity that my colleague is going to unpack here with the board with respect to the program review. So really, this was about Muscatine reaching out to the AEA in the spirit of continuous improvement to try to find ways to review the extent to which the special education programming in Muscatine was being effective for kids. So we really looked at 2 primary purposes in that respect, and that is the continuum of services. So every school district is expected to have a continuum of services that is responsive to student needs. And if you think about a continuum, there's meant to be no gaps within that continuum. So regardless of where the student lies on that continuum in terms of his or her disability, whether it's related to behavior or academic support, the district is expected to have a responsive continuum that provides that student exactly what he or she needs. So that was one piece that we used as an entry point. And then the second piece, taking that continuum of service and operationalizing that in the context of the classroom, what does service delivery look like? So for example, how does the student experience special education? What does specially designed instruction look like for that student in the classroom? How are they receiving their services from their instructor or from their teacher? So those are really two of the entry points to really review those different pieces. And again, it was all about continuous improvements. I commend the superintendent as well as the special education director because they took this on by choice. This is not something that they were required to do, but they really wanted to surface some of those areas for growth and some of those areas to celebrate some successes too. So the program review components were composed of 5 different pieces. So when we walked into the buildings, we had an administrative interview. So that was really just sitting down, looking at their respective data, asking some questions about eligibility rates, some of the things that we might expect to see as we're doing some classroom walkthroughs. That was that initial part, and that took place either at the beginning of the day in the morning or at the conclusion of the day once we had engaged in those walkthroughs. So then we went into classrooms. We spent about 10 to 15 minutes in those classrooms. We had a specific set of look-fors that we were expecting to see, and then we just wrote down and noted whether or not we were seeing those expected look-fors. We also did a data summary. So we reviewed student outcome data. How are students performing? What do those test results look like? How are they progressing relative to their IEP goals? That was another component. Reviewed some IEPs, so not every IEP, but we did a sample of an IEP review just again to look at, are the goals measuring what we think they should be measuring? Are they matched to the student's disability? Are they showing progress on their progress monitoring charts, those pieces? And then ultimately that landed in a series of recommendations. Following all those different data points, we aggregated those and synthesized those into an exit report that then we provided to the school district. Thought I was being pulled off stage. So this all took place in May of 2023. So that's when we visited all of the buildings in the district. And from there, then again, we put our heads together and synthesized some of the major bullet points from our observations and look-fors, and then put that into a final report. The building visits lasted roughly 60 to 90 minutes, depending on the number of classrooms that we went in. Some of the larger buildings, like the high school, took a little bit longer because there were more special education classrooms that we wanted to get in and to make some observations. And then we were looking at the learning environment as well as learner engagement. How does the child experience his or her specially designed instruction? That was really a question that grounded our observations as we were observing in the classrooms.
Good evening. I'm Kim Hoffman, the Director of Special Education with the Mississippi Bend AEA. Thank you for having us here tonight, and thank you to Becky and Clint just with your vision and your leadership to invite us in. As Shane said, this is not a required process. It's just a service that we offer our districts when they're really trying to dig in and understand their system, what's working, and maybe what are some areas of improvement as we work through that. And Muscatine was certainly well situated to gather as much information as they could given their ESSA designations and the IDA, DA designation, so that as they develop their action plans, they could be the most thorough and the most appropriate and well-matched as possible as they work through that. So I'm just going to highlight a few of the themes and then hit a few of the recommendations from our process that Shane explained. So first and foremost, the biggest overarching theme that we noticed was that students typically, regardless of if it's pre-K through 12, are provided services, special education services, in one of 2 primary service delivery models. And those are what you may have heard referred to as resource, which is when a student is in the general education classroom almost all day, and they go to their service, typically to a special education classroom, where they receive some specialized instruction around literacy that could vary in the amount of time, depending on that student need. The other bucket, or a typical delivery service that we noticed, was what we call self-contained. So that's when a student spends most of their time pulled out of that general education classroom in a self-contained setting. And just for your reference, these are typically students that are experiencing some behavioral challenges or significant cognitive delays where they have difficulty accessing that general education curriculum. So those were the two buckets that we typically see. And as Shane explained, what we're looking to do in our district is develop a full continuum of services. This approach of seeing these two main services, resource and self-contained, is not atypical by any means, but what we want to ensure is that we can be flexible and responsive if for some reason those two buckets don't meet an individual student need. So it just helps gives us kind of a lens of this is where we start, but are we responsive enough and flexible enough to develop and offer something different if needed. One of the data points I think is important to share with you is this idea of least restrictive environment. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's in federal code. It's that idea that first and foremost, students with disabilities are general education students first. And when we begin programming and thinking about how to meet their needs, we start with the assumption that that student is going to receive their supports and services in the general education classroom. And then based on that student's need, then we start working from that and determine how much time is appropriate and where that service should take place that would benefit the student with a disability, but also ensure that it's benefiting all the students in the classroom that that student might be educated with. So currently here in Muscatine, from a district perspective, about 67% of your students receive their instruction inside the general education classroom 80% or more of the day. That's federal language. It gets a little bit convoluted sometimes when we're talking about it quickly, but that's the current state of the district as a whole. Currently, the state is at 73% for the 21-22 school year because we're always 2 years behind. If we look ahead, that percentage of 73, that target for the state is going to grow. So in 25-26, the target is about 81%. That the state wants to see 81% of your students with disabilities receiving their instruction and supports within the general education classroom 80% of the time. So with Muscatine being at 67%, there's definitely an area of growth as we think about what that might be able to look like as we move forward. And then the other observation that we made was looking at, again, district-wide perspective. When you start looking at the preschool services and look kind of by building and by grade band and by level, you can start out as a preschooler, and the older you get in the system, the more restrictive your service gets. So the level of service I receive at an elementary, typically, on average, I might be more restrictive by the time I get to high school. That typically has nothing to do with the student, nor does it really have anything to do with the services. It's actually about our schedule and how we organize our time and what that looks like. So again, it's just one of those things to be aware of. Not atypical. If you were to go into any K-12 system, pre-K-12 system, you would see a very similar pattern, but it's always good to be aware of as we're thinking and planning and building our schedules, especially at those junior, senior high levels every spring, to make sure we're coming at it from a student-centered approach first, rather than building our schedule and fitting our students into it. So it's kind of flipping the script there. The other thing that was very obvious within Muscatine is there's a lot of opportunity to be flexible and responsive. There are a lot of highly qualified teachers. Special education teachers are very fortunate. I don't know that all your positions are filled, but many of them are. And you're in a much better space than a lot of other districts in our area. And you're able to fill a lot of your paraeducator positions as well. So those adults are our best resource, and you are resource rich in that arena. And so it's thinking about how do we utilize them in the best way to match them with kids and services. So for recommendations, we really focused on challenging the district to think about identifying opportunities to be flexible, responsible, and student-centered when we're building our schedules and when we're in individual IEP meetings and thinking about how can we best support the student and who is the right person. One of the misnomers of special education is that the special education teacher is always the best and most qualified individual to provide the specially designed instruction. when actually in federal code it tells us it could be anyone. It's really not your certification. You might have a reading specialist who's phenomenal at teaching reading, and so she might be the best person for this individual student to connect or at least be part of the team that supports that student. So again, thinking about individual student needs, how are we flexible and responsive, and then how do we create some efficiencies when we're developing our continuum of service and working through that. The other piece, which I don't think will be a surprise to you, is behavior supports. We know this is a huge need, not only in Muscatine, but across the state of Iowa. And there's definitely an opportunity here to maybe reimagine how we're providing supports to our students with challenging behaviors and what that could look like. That would involve how we're using our adults and what type of programming we're offering and where that programming is offered and how many students are involved in that. So an opportunity to engage into some creative problem solving to see, are we able to meet the students' needs within our environment, or do we need to start thinking about other options as well? And then the other recommendation was really ongoing professional development, which you'll hear in the next steps has already occurred. But how do we make sure that our special education staff and our paraeducators and our administrators have all the information and the strategies that they need so that they feel that they can be responsive and flexible to students as they're engaging with them on a daily basis and over the years.
So what is our communication plan? We started with all of you first, and so sharing this information tonight with you, we started with the board. We will then move on to our administrative team. So our administrative team, we have a monthly ATM meeting. So at our next January ATM meeting, this information will be shared with them. Then we will move into our special education staff. So during the month of January, Susan and myself will have numerous opportunities to share this information, whether it be in a virtual session after school, or if we, at the secondary level, we usually visit them during their department meeting and their team time plan meetings. So we will either, we'll have a plethora of opportunities, either virtual or in person, to get this information to all of our special education teachers. And then we also have a parent advisory council group, and our next meeting with that group is Monday, January 22nd. So we will then share this information with that group as well. This year we had a meeting and 42 people RSVP'd. Not quite 42 people showed up, but again, it's a great representation, and we have a couple other meetings scheduled as well. So we feel that this communication plan is pretty aggressive, but it's going to hit everyone in a timely manner. So we're looking at the month of January. And you might be wondering, well, what are you doing with all of this information? So Susan and I are going to share with you what has taken place prior and now and then after.
So as you're all aware, that this year you had a K-12, a huge K-12 literacy adoption and implementation, and the district ensured that all special education teachers were part of the professional development around that literacy adoption, because we know that all students with disabilities should have access to quality core instruction, and that is one of the ways that we will see that they will have gains in their ability to read and do math or anything when it comes to academic achievement. So the special education teachers, K-12, have been participating in that professional development. Along with that, we will be providing, we have been for our preschool teachers and then our teachers who work with our significantly cognitively disabled students for the past year and a half now, have been receiving professional development around specially designed instruction, and that's provided by AEA staff who are certified to provide that training. And starting in January, at the January District PD, our elementary special education teachers will start receiving training around specially designed instruction in K-6 literacy, and they will have that in the January and then April 12th PD days. Then we started a small part of this in the summer. We know that we need to make some changes in how we provide our programming for our students with significant disabilities. And so last summer, we, on a small degree, provided some support to a couple of teachers, and through our our specially designed instruction for significant disabilities teachers training and some other training that we will be providing maybe next summer, we hope to start to move that programming in another direction as well. And then through our ESSA and IDEA DA, those are a lot of letters, but our action planning. So we talked about how buildings wrote action plans for their ESSA designations. And along with that, with our IDEA DA determination, at the district level, we also wrote an action plan. And then Becky and Joelle and myself met with each principal at the elementary level individually to ensure that the ESSA actions and the IDEA DA actions, which included implementation of the literacy adoption and also the SDI training, would be added to their building action plans, their school improvement plans, so that they have one plan. Not that they have 3 separate plans, but they have one cohesive plan. We worked with our building principals to do that. We did that for the secondary as well, but for the IDEA piece. So we incorporated that and worked with it, and then we meet with our principals on a regular basis to follow up on their action plans. So that's part of what we're doing right now.
And then our ongoing administrative team learning, which we started in August before school started. We had a full day session with all administrators, our lead principals, as well as our assistant principals. And we had a lot of PD on various topics such as child find, the child find process, FAPE, LRE, placement and continuum of supports and services, and disciplinary considerations. We will continue with our ongoing support for our administrative team in the area of special education. In January, the AEA is also hosting a special education law session with Ehlers and Cooney. That's up at the AEA. So that too will be another touch point for our building administrators, just to gather more knowledge around, special education and the law. We also will provide ongoing special education for our teachers. And so Susan and I, on a monthly basis, go to our buildings and meet with the teacher teams, either, like I said, during their department time, which at the secondary, or at Susan Clark, they have a 5th period. And so we tend to meet with them in person. Our elementary sometimes has a little bit more challenges because there's quite a few more of them. So we've been offering online. So we will do like after school sessions from like 3:15 to 3:45, several snippets. That just seems to be an easier way to reach them. We also have a session January 26th with our elementary special education teachers that will have a half day on our SDI framework. And we will continue those touch points every month, such as the topics that we've talked about tonight, and adding more throughout the year. Our MCSD to service delivery plan, the current plan, ends in 2024. So this is a 5-year plan that is created at the district level, and it outlines what is our continuum of services and touching everything that we spoke about. Having the program review that our AEA did is just going to be valuable information and data that we can take a look at and look at what our future needs are and come up with a plan that supports that continuum of services and some of the other things that were addressed as recommendations. That is a 5-year plan. Typically, we gather groups of teachers along with our administration, our parent advisory council. That will be another group that we will vet this service delivery plan. So we will begin that process in April. It is required that we post it on our website. So once this service delivery plan has been vetted and approved. I will have Tony put it on our website, and we will begin the implementation. We'll be ready to go fall of 2024, and that will last clear till 2029, and then you'll start the process all over again. So every 5 years, there's a touch point to take a look at current practices and make room for revisions or changes. So that is a lot of information. If there are any questions that I can answer, or the experts sitting behind Tony, they are with us this evening too. So if you have any questions about the information or about AEA in general, they are here to answer if you have any.
I do have a few questions. I just made some notes. The LRE, who determines that percentage, what we're shooting for? 73, and then you said it would be 80, and then...
So I'm going to have my experts come up and talk about LRE. I have learned in special education, it depends.
Right.
So I'm going to let Kim take it from here.
It is the world of gray, that is true. But the targets are set by the state. So that is a target in particular that the federal government asks them to monitor annually. And so each state sets what their target's going to be in alignment with what the federal government expects, and then districts kind of chip away at working towards that.
And if that, it doesn't matter what, so you don't set a district percentage, it's a state percentage.
It's a state percentage, and then the district percentage is pulled from actual student IEPs. So the average of what the students in Muscatine, regardless of disability or level of service, are receiving.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So is there another way to define least restrictive, or it's only based on a percentage and not like actually what would be least restrictive to an individual? Like
It's meant to do it both ways. So that is a great question. So the way that the data is pulled is it is a percentage, but really the IEP team's job is to ensure that for each individual student, that they really think through what does LRE mean for me versus you, and it typically shouldn't be the same. So what this LRE is really trying to do is to really push districts into individualizing, because that's the spirit of special education, is creating an individual plan for every student and really help us to not get into the routine of, well, we provide resource services for literacy, and for math, we're going to come to you for that. We only do that inside the classroom. So it's trying to prevent the system from saying, this is what's available, and now plug your student into it, and really have the student need based on what is the LRA for that student drive that. It's tricky work. It's not easy, especially when you're trying to figure out an individual student and what that could potentially look like. So it's definitely not a perfect science, but really that target is really meant to be a constant reminder to us to really think about. It's about access. The best research that we know for students with disabilities and helping them to increase their outcomes is, number one, early identification supports, and number two, access to core curriculum. It's when we pull them out and we take away their ability to be exposed to grade level content and grade level conversations, where the research shows us that that gap starts to widen. And so this metric is really just that constant reminder, what makes the most sense for this student, but also gives the IEP team the flexibility, because no one outside of the IEP team knows that student and can make that decision.
So least restrictive isn't always in the gen ed.
It is not always. That is an excellent
So that
point.
20% covers the
Yep,
the
it's a
student
wide
that their
range.
best places in a...
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, I have several. First of all, back on your chart for the ESSA destinations, I wasn't quite sure what you meant on here from the standpoint that Grant and Madison and Mulberry do not have any targeted subgroups. Why would that be compared to the others?
So that could be due to one of two reasons. One, they don't have a subgroup that's large enough, so they have to have an N size of 20 students to even be accountable for that subgroup. So if they don't have that many students in that subgroup, they wouldn't have a designation regardless of performance. The other option is they do have an N size for which they would be held accountable, but their students are performing at a level that doesn't put them there. So they're not performing in the lowest 5% of the students across the state. So that's really how, in order to be designated in an area, first you have to meet the N size, And second of all, that those students in that group have to be performing within the lowest 5% of the kids across the state. That's how you get the designation.
Okay, thank you. And then my next question has to do with, I hear a lot of parents talk about their frustration on how long it even takes to even get an IEA, a plan even done. Difference between, you know, awareness that something's going on and diagnostic and then a plan and everything. So sometimes I've heard anyway, it could be, you know, a year, 2 years before that child may end up getting that. Why is that, or what can we do? It's a big question.
It is a big question, and it kind of depends on the student and their a variety of factors. So their exposure to school, are they attending? Do they have environmental factors that might be at play? Have they had high quality interventions? So the whole eligibility system in the state of Iowa, so that process through the evaluation will determine whether or not a student needs an IEP, is based on the idea that the system, so the school, has provided a number of high quality interventions that are matched with that student's needs. So we're really clear what the need is. We provided that intervention and the student hasn't responded. And so sometimes that delay, or what feels like a delay, can be because we can't quite pinpoint what that need is. So the interventions we're trying to match, there's a mismatch there. So we're always like going back to the drawing board. And sometimes it's other factors. Sometimes students aren't attending on a regular basis, so it's really hard to know, or really hard for us to actually implement the intervention. But in theory, in the spirit, it's not intended to be a multi-year process. It's actually meant between high quality MTSS implementation, which are those interventions, so us responding to students that don't have a disability currently. It's really in conjunction with that. So if we have a really healthy system that's responding to students, it actually helps that evaluation process go much quicker.
So along with that then, I suppose, is there anything that's almost like a pre-category or something? Because these kids are not necessarily getting what all that they need before all of that diagnostic and everything's done. Are there ways or things that we try to utilize to help those?
I don't want to, do you want to take that? Or do you want me to?
We can tag it.
Okay.
So my response to that question would be all of our buildings have an MTSS format. They have a framework. We talked about, I don't know if you remember when Paige and I presented maybe 2 months ago on, we had tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So that's where those levels of support come in before special education services. So again, like Kim referenced, a healthy system, response to intervention at tier 1 core. And if the student needs more, they would go to a tier 2 intervention. Child not responding needs more, they would go to a tier 3 intervention. And Kim alluded to the fact of robust intervention and data matching. And if we aren't seeing success, then we could move to what's called the child find process. Because now we have data that supports, we've had this at tier 1, this at tier 2, this at tier 3. And if it's fidelity and high quality, then we can move on to that child find process. And that data can be used towards that. So you're not having to start all over again. So again, healthy, robust system, it should click and roll. It should.
Thank you.
And
That's
if you
good
recall,
the difference on there. Thank you.
in October, Becky was here to kind of start talking about MTSS and behaviors and academics. That next kind of level or round of conversation will be at our meeting in January. So you'll see that topic come back. And again, it supports this conversation as well.
I do have a question here. As I'm looking at the same chart that we have on the screen, I'm looking at the number of IEP students in regard to the total number of our students, and percentage-wise, it will be around 14%. So is that like the norm, like statewide? Are we around the state percentage, above, below? I mean, can you give us more?
Yes, you're right at the state percentage. So the state percentage usually is around 13%, give or take a little bit, depending on the year. And historically, Muscatine has kind of ran between 12 and 14%, just depending on the population. So what that tells us is we're not over-identifying students, but we're also not under-identifying. So we're probably finding the right students, and then it's just about making sure we have the right supports in place for those students to be successful.
Thank you.
I do have a couple more questions or concern. I don't know. I guess you said not always a sped teacher. I don't remember who said that is the most important, but I don't see much training for any gen ed teachers in any of this, or communication to gen ed teachers. So that's going to be one of my concerns, is that the gen ed teachers are getting the support they need. Are they responsible for tier 1 and tier 2?
They are, and our general education teachers and our special education teachers receive the same training. Like when we talked about our K-12 literacy adoption, all teachers, gen ed, special ed, our EL teachers, all of our teachers attended the high quality PD that we had with the literacy adoption. So all teachers are included. We are going to start focusing first in January, the rollout of this to special education teachers first, but our general education teachers are always included. And many times the training that is provided for gen ed, special ed is also there.
Right. I
automatically, yeah.
But I guess I feel like there's a lot of next steps that are going to be specific to sped teachers and administration, which obviously are of great importance, but if our goal is to keep the kids in the room more, I think maybe teachers, gen ed teachers, could use more support and training as well, is a concern. And then is there are the paras getting special training?
So yes,
Do they get any,
correct. So actually, last year we started district-wide PD for all of our para-educators, where it didn't matter if they were working with our special education paras, our building paras, transportation, all of our support staff, our media clerks and us. So last year we started that, and they were included in all of our teacher in-service times. So they had in-service time required. We talked a lot about MTSS, a little bit about special education, tier 1. Kurt Slater, if you remember Kurt, he delivered that and worked with our support staff and kind of explaining what a healthy MTSS system is, starting with core. And then we have ongoing support for our para-educators. They are included at all of the building staff meetings if they would like to join. Plus, with our CEBA leads, they provide support for them at the building level based on what their need is. So for example, this year we are hitting every building with de-escalation strategies. So we will have our support staff attend that training. We just got done with doing 3 sessions with our high school support staff. So that is something that we continue to provide month in at all of the buildings.
So CEBA's can, like, let's say we have a para that's working with a specific behavior type of student. CEBA's can help that para with skill. I guess I feel like we have a lot of paras that are just like, I don't know what to do.
We provide that training ongoing. We have touch points with the building principal and their special education teams. So our special education teams meet bi-weekly, so they can bring up any of those wants and needs with the principal. And then since we have a CEBA in every building, then they can respond to, tell me more. Is it de-escalation? They have tools in their toolbox that they can share on site at that building with them. But our special education teachers also are given time to work with their support staff as needed as well.
Okay. And then is there a procedure if, I don't know if this is the right time for this question, but a procedure for if a para or a teacher or a parent feels that their IEP is out of compliance?
Yes, there is a procedure. Do you want to talk about
or
procedures?
Or just where I can find it if it's...
Yeah, typically if, let's say, for example, a parent is thinking, like you said, if a parent feels that something isn't being done or they have questions about, they reach out to the special education teacher or the building principal, and we have an IEP team meeting and we talk about it. So yeah, those can happen anytime. So if a parent has questions, working with a special education teacher answering those questions. If they need more support on services, or if services are in question, you gather an IEP team meeting, you look at the current IEP, and then you kind of go from there, whatever those concerns are.
The team makes a recommendation and they all have to agree on that?
IEP teams make the yes, IEP teams determine supports and
They don't have to be approved
services.
by anybody. They, as a team, if they come up with a recommendation, that's,
IEP team, yes, the IEP team makes the decision for the IEP, correct. And parent voice is a part of that process
right.
as well,
No,
yes.
Obviously, I've been in on
This
them,
may
but-
be, this may be a question a little different than how Kim was stating it, but you talk about the current steps and getting some more training for the SPED teachers and such, but can, like, for example, the reading specialists, can they be part of that so they can understand and know maybe a little bit better, you know, how to handle if they are asked to be able to be part of a grouping, you know, with that? You know.
Yeah, yep.
I guess I
Yes.
would like to see, just obviously from some of my experiences, but paras, I mean, it's great that they understand the system and the MTSS and how it works and all of that, but that really isn't directly what they need. Sometimes they need specific skills. They need strategies, and maybe, I don't know if that can be included or something to think about is
No, that's great input.
strategies for those kids and the time that they're, and I know we have a high turnover of paras, but if they're not, and not that they're not trying, but if they don't have those skills or strategies, then we're not using they could be so much more effective if we had a little more, I feel, I mean.
Yeah, no,
and
I
I've had
appreciate the feedback
teachers
and the input.
or paras approach me about similar things,
Yeah.
just like we're at our end, what do we do? So, I don't know. That's
And no, it's great input, it's great feedback, and that's why we're here, to get feedback from all of you too and answer questions, so we can take that as we work on second semester with the planning.
And just along those points, Becky, if you want to talk a little bit about the grants that we have that's given us the funds that have allowed us to do that, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, that's
just
true.
as a good reminder.
Yes. So a couple years ago, we wrote a grant and received $100,000, and that's what we used those monies in paying all of our support staff in trainings, ongoing trainings, from relationships to MTSS to behavior. And then we wrote another grant and we received $326,000 over a 3-year period. So we do have access to funds that we can use in training all staff, teachers and our support staff. And so we've got a 3-year plan that includes, so that pot will run dry really quickly.
Can that grant be used to pay for subs for paras and teachers to go at the same time and get the training outside of the 30 minutes or, the small chunks of time?
Yeah, we can. They're in part of the grant, professional development, they have some stipulations, but subs are covered on that. The issue with that is, right now, it's kind of difficult to find subs that we could do, things with. So we work around things.
Could it be additional pay for paras and teachers, like extended day pay or something like that? I'm just saying, I
Yeah,
think sometimes you go to these 30-minute meetings, by the time you get everybody there, you do a 30-minute meeting, they don't really absorb a lot.
Yes.
It'd be a lot better if they could work together with their paras for a half day or a chunk of time.
Yeah. Yes, we have some flexibility with those monies to pay them at their daily rate or whatever their, per diem would be. But yes, we do have some flexibility with that.
Is there, in IEP meetings too, I mean, I know as we're coming up with IEP plans for students, of course, we write them to the student needs, but we also know our capacity to meet them and support those students. So is there like a wish list bucket somewhere that it's like, oh, if I had this in my building, the IEP would be so much more fitting for this student? Or do we not talk about those
Wish
things?
list
Or,
bucket.
I don't know. So, right, like if there was something that could meet that student's need, but we just don't have the capacity to even mention it at the IEP table.
Yeah, it's a tricky question.
Yeah.
So
I know.
There is no wish list bucket, but it's a really good idea. I like it. Really, when we come to the table, we have to have a really strong sense of what that student needs. And at each IEP meeting, there is someone that's designated, often your building principal, but it could be other people that have been designated as someone who can allocate resources for that IEP team. So if the conversation is describing something that isn't currently available, it might be something that we need to explore. What would that take? How could we do that? What might that look like? And so sometimes we don't have the answer right off the top of our heads, but the team may say, you know what? Great description, love where you're going with this, not sure that's something that we do right now, which is not something great to say in an IEP meeting. But the important part is the but. But let's see, let me go check with some people, do some research, see what different options we have that could meet that need. Maybe not in the way the team originally thought, but there's a lot of different ways to meet IEP team needs. They just have to be creative sometimes. Ideally, that happens in the moment. It can't always happen in the moment, depending on what it is. So it's really the spirit of not just, no, we don't do that here. It's, oh goodness, we've never done that before, but let us see if we can figure it out. Let us see how we can meet your student where they are and get them what they need.
And
That's how
who
I'd answer that. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who helps them with that? So who would help them with that maybe isn't at the table? Like, what is their next step? Would they go and ask for more support from the district if it was like a staffing need that they had? Or
I mean,
if they
again,
needed
it could
more
be a
support,
variety of
right?
things, but also remember a part of this process is the data that's showing that they would need. Are they leading in that direction? We would bring the AEA in to have more conversations as they look at resources across. So it's not a question of necessarily, no, we can't do it, but would the data indicate that that would be helpful? And if it would, then we have to figure out a way to make it happen. And we would work with the AEA to do that.
And just one more thing. I guess back to the Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions. Is that something that CBAs or ICE, who can help with that? I feel like gen ed teachers are getting, that might be honestly part of the slowing down of the process. How can they fit? Let's say I have 5 kids that need interventions in my classroom. Are we being creative in how we assist the teachers in the Tier 1 and Tier 2s?
Yes, every building has what's called an SST team, student support team, so they refer kids, and every building has a support team made up of CBA lead, instructional coach, AEA, nurse, principal, counselor, and I'm probably missing a couple others, but students can be referred, and that's exactly what they do. Student is referred whether it's, academics, behavior, or other, depending on what it is, and then the team can consider what the needs are at this time, who can oversee that, and what needs to happen. So it's not just the CBA lead. When we kind of look at behavior, we kind of look at the CBA lead as the expert for behavior, but if it's academic, you could be looking at other people too. And then we follow to make sure, is core meeting their needs, and if it's not, what's needed. And then every building has a Tier 2 and a Tier 3, which could be people and added supports for that students once they identify what the need is. If there's behaviors, then a CBA lead needs to work with the teacher, collect data, come up with a plan or a support or an intervention plan, and then work with the teacher in that to collect data to see where is it going. Does this student just need a check-in, check-out with a person, or is it more? So every building is equipped with people and teams.
So is that a standard procedure across the board? Are our SST teams, forms and everything, does it look the same from building to building?
I'm unsure if it actually looks the same. There's a referral process for everything, yes. High school, that looks a little bit different because they have 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th.
No, I'm
So
talking
your
like even
teams
just
kind of
your
look at.
elementaries. Do they all follow the same MTSS process?
Correct.
And they all have the same forms that they fill out? and the
Correct.
same
There's a referral process that kids are referred to. There's identification. A student to be referred to the SST, there's some things that need to happen prior to that. SST wouldn't be your first. And so, yes, and so there's people that ensure that
there's people that
support
help
is
with
there.
those.
Absolutely, yep.
Where
absolutely.
are because I've heard you say a lot about all of that, but where are the parents? Where are they involved with anything with the process?
Yeah, parents
or when
are always
do they
involved.
come in with the process?
Yeah, typically your parent is involved with the teachers, and so the teacher is in communication with the parents. If there's needed supports, there's conversations that should already be happening. Yes, so typically, they are right there alongside, or at least included in what's going on.
I've probably met my quota, but what about those kids that don't have a parent advocate? We all know they're there. Do we have a system set up for somebody that can advocate for that kid when their parent isn't necessarily?
Yes, you have to be careful legally,
understand
and there's a few other things, but yes, if we have to make sure confidentiality and the right people are involved. We also have resource navigators, And the resource navigator can be a point person and an advocate. If the student has an IEP, we have support people from the AEA that can support that too. But, you know, obviously we have to be careful because
Right.
there's things like that too. And there's some legal documentation. We have some kiddos that already have that in place, and so they already have an advocate. It might not be, you know, bio mom or bio dad, but there's a team in place that can make decisions that, you know, whether it's a gen ed or a student with an IEP. But yes, we have our school counselor, our resource navigators, so we have people that we can contact if, like you said, if there's an absence of a parent or grandparent or something like that, then we work with them. And our principals know our kids, and they know the families, and our teachers know that. And so a lot of times if there are challenges that's happening, the school is aware of that, and I know that our principals and our teachers work really hard with families to whatever they need to do. Yes.
Not saying they don't, I just
Right.
sometimes think we lose some kids because we don't have the right support for them, and maybe more support for parents too, but that's another day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions for the team here? Okay, well, Becky, Kim, Shane, and Susan, thank you for all the
Yes, thank you.
information that you
Yep.
shared with us.
Thank you.
I'm sure it's a great discussion. I'm sure most probably we'll have you again here to continue that discussion. And Kim and Shane, thanks for also participating in our community conversation. I mean, it was an amazing discussion downstairs, and hopefully again, we'll have you back sometime next year, 1 month, to continue that discussion. Thank you for everything. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. So moving forward, we move into the board targets, goals, reports. Item A, students will graduate prepared for post-secondary options. Item B, Muscatine schools will utilize resources effectively and equitably. And item C, students will learn in a positive and supportive environment. We don't have any item to discuss under this, but I would like Clint, if you would like to add anything to this.
Yeah,
please.
thank you, John. I just have some things I want to update you on. One, we've already talked about in January, coming back to you both, I think, at the regular session and probably also at the work session, talking about more about the MTSS, both from an academic and a behavior standpoint. There's just a lot of conversation that I think is important for the board to have and a knowledge base. So we'll get that back in front of you. Wanted to mention a little bit just from a construction standpoint with Central. We are working on identifying some days in January. One will be during the week, and then one would be on the weekend. I believe we've talked about a Thursday evening and then like a Saturday morning that would be open to the public to come in and kind of see the building one last time, but also shortly after that, then we would do an online auction for certain things within the building, and that gives people an opportunity to say, hey, you know, we might be interested in this, and that's something we can add to the auction process. Right now, and we've had some questions about this, they are going back through and working on removing asbestos from that building. It has been abated already, but sometimes in between the walls and under light fixture, just different places, it still exists. And so before we can do any demolition on that building, we have to get it, you know, approved and certified again. So we do have a company that's been working there to remedy that. So that's kind of put off some of our having the building open and some of the next steps on that. But just wanted you to be aware of that. Another item that's we'll have in front of you in January is further conversation about alternative high school. So we've had some teachers, as you may recall, over the last year, working with the Roy J. Carver Charitable Trust, have had an opportunity to do planning on what that program could look like. So they've kind of built the program, and right now, I think as you're aware, we've been waiting on a location. And although I'm not going to talk about a location tonight, we are getting closer and closer to having that laid out. But we need to get that program in front of you so you can see that. So we'll have some teachers working on that yet this month and get them in front of you in January to talk about that and then expect in January and February more conversations about that location. We do know that we'll be going back to the Roy J. Carver Charitable Trust to talk more about supporting funding for that location once that's been determined. And I believe February 15th is the deadline to submit the next round of grants, which would be revealed or approved in April. So we've got a number of things kind of coming up that I just want to keep in front of you. As you know, we also will have some conversations as we get into this next year of 2024, early in the year, around some boundary changes to do the things we need for Jefferson and Madison, and how that will impact a few. Again, trying to do as little changes as we can, but we have to get that temporary classroom out of Madison. We also know we're going to have a larger building at Jefferson, and we need to make some adjustments there. So more conversation, and obviously there'll be communication with families and with staff, and as we move that forward. Also in January for our regular meeting, we'll talk about it again in our work session, and then it'll be in front of you in February for approval. Will be a calendar, and that's the time of year that we typically do that. So we're kind of putting the pieces together. We'll present that to you at that first meeting in January. We'll get feedback from staff and from parents. We'll make any changes necessary, make sure you see that again in the second meeting in January, and then have it in front of you. Again, we have opportunities each time we present it to you to make some adjustments, but in that February meeting, look to finally approve that. So just know that's coming up. And then just a couple other things I'd like to share. One, had a meeting with MCC, with Muscatine Community College last week, talking about concurrent enrollment, and the number of students at the high school that are participating in concurrent enrollment, and our career academies continues to grow. And so we're seeing some good growth, especially in those career academies. We were a little bit down last year, but this year, I think right now we're at 81 students participating. Remember, they've expanded some of those programs, so now we have an HVAC program, we have a automotive tech program, criminal justice also has been added, and we've added some capacity to the healthcare academy, which leads to a CNA degree. The other piece, so a couple other, I think, important pieces. One, MCC now on its campus can offer an RN program. Previously, that was only offered in the Quad Cities. So that is great for a lot of our kids who are in that. That healthcare academy has been very popular. And essentially, as they finish the healthcare academy, if they did an additional, I believe it's an additional year, they could finish an RN degree, so graduate high school and then within a year have completed an RN program. And again, thinking about setting our kids up to be successful and get into the workforce, that's really exciting. We also have a career academy for teaching. So we have 4 students in that program. We're also in some conversation with the University of Iowa about developing basically a teacher education club at the high school. The University of Iowa does some of that with some schools in Iowa City, Cedar Rapids area. They've had an agreement with Kirkwood Community College, and it's something we'll be talking with MCC about, that essentially, students that would be in this club participate in the Career Academy and complete that, when they go to the University of Iowa, would start right into their College of Education. So it'd be like more of a fast track into the education program. Usually there's some, the first year or two, you're doing some of your general ed requirements. Basically, they'd be finishing those while they're in high school and ready to move right into the ed program, which helps them finish a little bit faster or add some additional certifications. So it's how do we kind of grow your own, create more of a pipeline for teachers. So again, we'll continue to bring that back to you, but I think some exciting next steps for our students moving forward. And then just the last piece, last week at the AEA, the superintendents, we had the opportunity to meet with Director Snow, the new Director of Education for the state of Iowa. She talked a little bit about what some of the state priorities are. As they've looked at some of the results, both from a state testing standpoint, but also some of the national testing, the NAEP test, the National, National Assessment of Educational Progress. And that's done in, I believe, 4th and 8th grade. It's randomly assigned each year. We don't get any of that data back. It basically gets pushed up to the state of Iowa and to the federal level. What they're seeing is Iowa has some of the largest achievement gaps. The achievement gaps in Iowa continue to grow. So we're kind of moving further down the list and having larger gaps than we're used to in the state. So that's a priority for them. Very clear that their focus is going to be on literacy, the science of reading, which will include teacher professional development around letters training, which we've already been doing. CKLA and that work that we've been doing in our literacy adoption aligns really well with what they're going to be focusing on, including the achievement gaps in special ed and EL. And we just heard that presentation on special education. Again, that's something that we're seeing consistently across the state as well. And another area that continues to grow statewide is chronic absenteeism. So where prior to COVID, the state average was, I'd say, 11 or 12%. Now, keep in mind, we've been working on chronic absenteeism because it's always been high here. But across the state, it's been very low. This past year, the state of Iowa's average is now up to 23%. So post-COVID, they're seeing that absentee issue across the state. So they're changing also some of the accountability measures. So when you heard the different subgroups and that we didn't make adequate progress in some of the areas, it's based on that accountability framework and how that's determined. They're going to be making some changes to that, which I think are positive. They'll be adding chronic absenteeism into that matrix. And again, the work we've been doing, both from chronic absenteeism, but also from literacy and some of our professional development, I think it shows that we're really headed in the right direction with where the state is going to be. So I think it was a good conversation. We'll kind of keep you posted on anything that comes out of that. But it was good to at least know kind of what they're going to focus on and kind of where we're at relative to that. So with that, any questions?
Thank you, Clint. So moving forward with our agenda, we move into action and possible action. The following items are considered to be routine by the Board of Education and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a director so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence from the agenda. The items are 1, minutes, 2, bills and claims, 3, special education contracts, 4, employment recommendations, 5, policies no minimal required by law, and 6, third and final policy reading. What are the wishes of the board?
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, those of you who are in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carried. And I see Tom is ready for us. Right. So we move into the November financials.
Yep. Okay, so tonight we have November financials presented here. The treasurer's report there as November 30th compared to last year at the same time. I don't have a lot of anything to point out really on the financials. You know, we're almost halfway through our fiscal year in another month, or actually in a few weeks. So I think no red flags that I need to point out. We did submit for all of our federal reimbursement this month in November, and so most of them have been approved and should be reimbursed. That revenue there is on page 5 there in the federal part of the revenue for the general fund. I will go back to the calendar. This afternoon, I was listening to a webinar about the changes in the budget certification process. I'm not sure if many of you were aware of those changes. And so I just wanted to put out there that basically we're going to have 2 public hearings this year. They have moved the budget certification date back to April 30th. And then by March 15th, we have to have some information presented to the county auditor, and then there will be a, let me get the terminology right here. So a taxpayer statement will be mailed out to all property tax owners of Muscatine County by the county auditor, not by the school. So you'll get that property tax statement, and then you as a school board have to have a public hearing on that property tax statement. That can't happen until after March 25th. So in all likelihood, we like to, in the past, we've tried to keep our public hearings on the same night as a regular board meeting, but I don't believe in how this is going to work in April that we'll be able to do that. So I'm just putting it out there, proposing a lot of this information we'll have settled by our February 26th board work session. So this will have some more solid dates here, but we're likely, possibly have one public hearing on March 25th and then the next one on April 8th. But again, I'll learn a lot more here after the first of the year, and by February 26th, when we have that work session, we should be pretty, know what dates, because there's publication requirements, no less than 10, no more than 20 dates that we got to put these notices in the newspaper, and so there's all kinds of those requirements and probably more that I will learn too. So that process has changed, and so I kind of put that on the amended agenda timeline here. And then actually another thing that's changed in January, I'll bring back to you the approved audit report. We are done with the FY23. We have our annual comprehensive financial report done, and that'll be presented to the audit committee here, and then we'll get it approved at the January 8th board meeting. So and then February, obviously the 26th, we'll have that work session, and we've been working on a 5-year budget projection model that will show the school board. Take a few weeks to relax, and then we'll hit the ground running in January with budget and negotiations and all kinds of fun stuff. So that's it. Thank you.
Any question for Tom? Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. Okay, the next item is the item B, first reading on policies 201.4, elections to the board. Anybody have any question? Remember, every policy, it goes in front of us for 3 readings. So if you have any question or requiring any edits or anything, please connect with Daphne and have discussion with her. If there's no question, we move into item C, review administrative regulations and exhibits 403.8R, which is the employee identification badges, administrative regulations. Any question? Okay. Item D, the announcement, upcoming meetings and events. December 20th, 2023, 2-hour early dismissal. December 21st, 2023, January 2nd, 2024, winter break, no school. January 3rd, 2024, teacher in service day, no school for students. January 4th, 2024, school resumes, and January 8, 2024, a school board community conversation, and I would like to bring this to your attention. The place The location and the time will be different. Starting January, both the community conversations and the regular board meeting will be at the Muscatine Community School District Administrative Center, which is on the 2900 Mulberry Avenue. So we'll start meeting there. So the community conversation will start at 5:30, and the regular board meeting starts at 6:15, and both at the Administration Center. January 9, 2024, River Bend Food Pantry at 4:30, same at the Administration Center. Anybody would like to add anything to this list? Would like to wish everyone a safe and a happy holiday also. And with that, if we have a motion to adjourn, please.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Those of you who are in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Oppose? Good night, everybody.